Hey.
Hello.
Salutations.
Salutations, yes. Good evening.
The bowl full of crust and a bottle of mush.
A bowl of crust?
Yes.
Ugh. Ugh. It's like when you leave a cereal bowl out overnight.
And it just turns into like cement lining the inside of the bowl.
It's just like slightly tacky Elmer's glue with like specks of cornflake.
Honey bunches of oats.
Monday nights.
Here we are, episode 175 of Snakes and Stogies, which is part of the Herpeticulture Network, which is brought to you by BlackBoxCages.com, Cold-Blooded Caffeine, Fulvius Apparel, Puget Sound Pythons, and Sudafed for me.
Sudafed.
Pseudoephedrine.
Pseudoephedrine.
Look at that. There he is.
I didn't scroll down to the bottom of the page and see Inner Studio, so I've just been sitting there with that camera and mic for 15 minutes.
Well, you're here now, brother.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so blackboxcages.com. Use the code THN at checkout if you're going to get yourself something. Might as well get yourself something nice. And Blackbox has nothing but nice stuff. And if you use that code THN, you save yourself a little bit of money. From our gift to you from the Blackbox crew. And then use the code THN at checkout as well on fulviusapparel.com. Get yourself a shirt like Sir Dustin there. He's rocking that Circus de Nassicus shirt. And got some orders going out in the morning. Get some shirts and stuff. And then Puget Sound Pythons. Go hunt them down on Morph Market. See what they got for sale. Grab yourself something cool. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram. And Cold-Blooded Caffeine. You like coffee. Phil likes coffee. I like coffee. I'm sure Dustin likes coffee. There we go. Look at that.
He's got it in the hand.
And actually, if you actually use the link in the description, because we now have that affiliate link.
Oh, really?
Grab yourself some Cold-Blooded Caffeine. And, I mean, you use that link, help us out a little bit, all that good stuff. We are working on something with them. Don't know when we're going to actually sort of unveil that. I won't spoil it. So, go get some coffee.
Get some coffee.
But we're here. It's Monday. It's 1,000,000 degrees still, and I'm tired of it. And apparently, there's a hurricane that's coming.
Yes,
it's going right over you, isn't it?
It's actually going just past me, so I'm going to get most of the muck.
But it's like going just above you. Like
yes,
yeah,
yes.
It's hitting Billy like full bore, right?
It's gonna thwack Billy, Harry, Skylar, Derek. I'm trying to think of who else of our friends it's just going to collide with, but it's only a Cat 1. So like grab your Amstel Light in your cooler and chill. Lawn chairs
load
indoors.
Up on cigars. That's right.
Yeah. Get your cartons of cigarettes and your beef jerky.
During Hurricane fucking Ingrid, I don't know what her name was. It was one of the ones after Matthew. I survived off tortilla chips for 2 days.
That's horrible.
Tortilla chips and water.
That's
now
really
I'm a hardened,
really gross.
A hardened survivor.
Fair enough.
And I think there was a pack of Pop-Tarts or two in there.
Oh, was there?
It was dessert.
Yep. Yeah, they're a grave inconvenience in the Southeast. So,
yeah.
But fingers crossed for all of our friends.
Justin Olson texted me this morning because he just moved down here, and so this is like this baby's first hurricane. And he's like, "What do I need to expect with this?" I'm like, "Oh, is there one coming?" Because I literally haven't been paying attention. I was like, "Is there one headed our way?" He's like, "Yeah, I think so." And I like went and looked at the tracker. I was like, "It's fine."
Yeah,
I ain't worried about no hurricane.
We've been having some crazy weather. Just like it rains every day down here this time of year, but it's been raining like later and like more heavily with like actual storms, not just like an afternoon drizzle. And dude, it's been bizarre. My county had all kinds of craziness today. The police rescue helicopter crashed in the city.
Jesus.
Yeah, and like you watch the videos, it looks like friggin' Mogadishu. It's horrible. And
Black
then
Hawk down, son.
yeah, and then you had that happen this morning at like 9 a.m, and then there was like 4 or 5 collisions on the interstate. So then there was like traffic lights out because of the storms, and like, dude, my county, it took me 45 minutes to go home. And
there's something about like hurricanes in particular, and like when they start showing up like this, people lose their damn minds.
I know, man, it's bizarre.
Like you'll be like a week and a half out from a hurricane actually making landfall, assuming it's actually going to stay on the path that they're saying it's going to, which it rarely does.
Right.
And people are already like loading up on like water and milk and bread and toilet paper, and it's like it's not even here yet. For all we know, it could be nothing by the time it gets to us. Like I don't know.
I did watch though, because this is the first like I guess real one of Florida this season, and I mean there was that one that hit Fort Myers last year? That was last year. Okay, so this is the first like real one this year. But I watched the hurricane. I guess they put, I don't want to say GoPros, but like they put like multiple cameras on the hurricane plane, that the weather plane that they fly into the storm. Dude,
hell no.
Dude, and it's crazy because like
that video was like absolutely not.
There's turbulence and shit, but like it doesn't look that bad.
It looks
sketchy.
Fun.
It looks sketchy as hell.
You gotta have like give zero fucks to. So.
Yeah, just brass balls.
Which I think I've heard though, those planes, like when you're actually in the storm like that, I don't think it's as rough as it is like below it, where everything's like really caught up. Like I don't know.
And then I heard they have like a special. Yeah, I'm not Al Roker. I heard they have like a special lightning rod system, because the thing gets zapped like all the time, but the pilots don't even know it because it just like diverts it,
dissipates it or something.
Yeah. There's no like actual impact from what I hear.
It's ridiculous.
Cray.
Our species was never meant to be above ground like that.
I think it's awesome.
Flight, space travel, all that. This is not what Darwin was talking about. Like he's like, you guys are doing the opposite of what I'm telling you to do. Like I understand flying is statistically safer than driving, but your statistics of dying from a plane crash almost 100%.
But bro, the finches. Think of the finches.
No. There's just something about being in a giant metal tube 30,000 feet above the ground that you have zero control over that I'm just not into. I
know.
Call me weird.
I avoid it like the plague, but sometimes you have to do what you got to do.
Even if I was in control of it, still don't think I'd do it. But
yeah. Well, Dustin, we should have been mole people.
Tunnels.
Fossorial.
Tim Freisen said, I'm in Southern California and the local tractor supply sold out of generators during Hurricane Hillary, which is the whole like West Coast hurricane thing is just bizarre to me, because that just doesn't
bizarre
happen
to them.
It's like, how does it feel?
Yeah, right.
They're really not that bad though, for the most part. I mean, every once in a decade we get that really gnarly one, but since Matthew, we haven't had anything serious, so we're good. I think we'll be all right. But be prepared. Be ready. We never finished that checklist we were going to put on the website. The disaster prep evac list.
We got to do it.
Keller, they wouldn't let you on an airplane.
They imagine like something happens and Keller's on the plane and he's like, I'm actually a licensed commercial pilot. and like he lands the plane and like everyone claps. It'd be amazing. He's just secretly a C-130
Or
pilot.
if it were like Lost or like This Is the End, I think he would be like Danny McBride. He'd just become like the Cannibal King and have Channing Tatum on a leash. Except it'd be like Skylar or something.
I was gonna say Jake.
Or Jake, yeah. But
oh, Keller, we love you.
the animals are mad at us. Killer whales attacking boats, sharks everywhere attacking people, otters attacking people.
Otters.
I can see a gang of otters doing some damage, dude. Coming around the corner like the Warriors.
Not sea otters. They're too cute.
Snapping their fingers.
Like
West Side Story.
West Side Story. When you're a jet all the way. Well,
what are you smoking this evening?
I am actually, this is my first time having one of the Habanos that Kevin Barron gave us in Daytona. So it says,
I smoked them all.
Selectos Haloguin. Smells good. We're gonna find out. What about yourself?
Romacraft Aquitaine.
Delicious.
Good old standby. And then I got a Perdomo. Is this a 20th anniversary Maduro in the Corona.
Excellent.
Great little smoke. I see these pitch black wrappers, man, on the shelf, and I just it's like a magnet, and I'm like a moth to one of those damn zapper light things.
Yeah, with the red band.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. French fry taters. And our esteemed guest this evening, Dustin. What are you partaking in your adult vice besides coffee?
Coffee and nicotine pouches. I had a nub Habano, one of the longer ones, not the ones that's only like 4 inches. Yeah. But I cut it and it come completely apart, and I just got
that stinks.
I've had that happen a few times where I cut something and it's just a disaster, and I get so mad that I just throw it away. I just trash it.
Yeah. A for effort though.
Yeah, it's either smoke it and be spitting out little pieces of Lincoln for the next hour, or just throw it away, and I chose the latter.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Well, I was talking to Dustin yesterday, and we talk fairly regularly, but he's official name is West Kentucky Exotics, and we were talking about sort of tobacco related stuff, and because in the Southeast in particular, there's maybe not necessarily the Southeast, but like Virginia, I know Tennessee's a big one. More upstate in South Carolina, I believe, but like tobacco is grown mostly for the smokeless tobacco. So, your chews and dips and things like that. But Dustin had mentioned that, he pretty much grew up on a tobacco farm more or less. And that's kind of one of the things that got him into reptiles and snakes and stuff. So I figured that'd be a really cool, that's like a perfect fit for this.
Hell yeah.
And it's cool because you sent me some pictures as well, and it's interesting to see how similar but how different the tobacco farming is in the U.S. compared to Central America and down south. So
yeah,
but we're glad you're here, man.
Yeah, man, glad to have you on. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
It's good stuff, man. And you get some great animals in the collection, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a small collection. I never intend nor want this to be a business. I mean, I think all 5 of the corn snakes I've produced this year I've given to kids so far. I'm not looking to make money out of it. It's a hobby. I have a pretty draining 9 to 5 emotionally, and this is kind of my escape.
Hell yeah, man. And dude, giving babies to kids, that's why we do it, It's awesome.
Yeah, so we'll sort of jump into the nitty gritty.
The nitty gritty.
We let people decide whether they want to give us like the full story as to how you got to where you are currently in herpetoculture, or if you want to give us the Cliff Notes version, that's fine too. But like, what are you keeping currently, and how did you get to keep what you were keeping currently?
Okay. Well, right now I have one berm. It's just a pet. My idea of trying to find suitable homes for a snake that gets that large is my own personal nightmare. But I really that was kind of a dream species of me, because when I was younger, there was this little roadside zoo, down the road that was like called Woods and Wetlands Wildlife Center, I think. And my grandparents bought like the summer pass. So when I was 5 and 6, all through the summer, we would go up there, and the guy that owns it got to where he knew when I would walk in, and he'd just go pull out like his 11-foot albino berm and lay it in the floor, and I'd just sit there and play with it. So that was always kind of a dream species of mine. Growing up on the tobacco farm, there was always snakes around, because when you're all the different processes that are required to grow tobacco, like cutting it down, for instance, when you cut down rows of tobacco, you have to lay it down on the ground overnight, because it has to wilt to be able to spike it onto the stick and hang it on the wagon. If it doesn't wilt, you'll just lose all the leaves. The leaves are super brittle when they're fresh. So we would cut down the tobacco and lay it down, and the next morning when you was picking up that much tobacco, it was almost unheard of to pick it all up and not find, Heterodon platyrrhinos or, one of those. That was the place that I found Eastern hognoses the most, is underneath tobacco that we had cut the night before. And then, of course, the dark fired process with the slab piles that sit there sometimes half a year, and the piles of sawdust that would get, warm and moist underneath. That was a great place to find snake eggs. And then packing the slabs in, we always found snakes. And I was just always super fascinated. I loved animals altogether, but I was always super fascinated with the snake. Just watching how effortlessly something moved that didn't have any legs. It still fascinates me to this day, just to watch a snake move. Just the way it propels itself forward, seemingly by magic, just always fascinated me.
That's awesome.
And when I was really young, my mom was deathly terrified of snakes, like deathly terrified of snakes. But, I would catch the ringneck snakes and the rough green snakes, and I was terrible at keeping them. I bought, I had the calcium sand and the heat rock from Walmart for a rough green snake, because I was 5 and there was no internet or any ways to find the right ways to keep them.
We've been there, man.
But that's just how I grew up, was, catching the snakes around. I got to where I wouldn't even try to keep them long term. I'd catch them, put them in a critter keeper for a week, and then release them. I had a couple of ball pythons that were pets, a lot of iguanas. I shared with Justin one day when I was in high school, I caught a copperhead and kept it in a 20-gallon aquarium with books stacked on top, and told my mom it was a northern water snake, because I knew she wouldn't touch it anyway. It was completely dumb, but I was 17 and dumb and super brave. But yeah, it just kind of grew from there. And there was a time in my life where I took off from keeping reptiles and didn't have any, and I got married, and that was always kind of one of my wife's rules, was no snakes in the house. So I got super into keeping fish and aquariums. I had like 17 aquariums. And then when I had my son, all the aquariums had to move, because they were in the lower level house on the concrete floor. And there was no other room in my house that the floor joist would hold that much water. So through a little bit of negotiating with terrorists, as Justin would say, I was allowed the room upstairs, but that I could put anything I wanted to in it. And the first thing I bought was the berm.
Nice, man. That's great. That's awesome. Just starting off with a flagship. I love it.
That's right.
Yeah. And then as far as what I'm keeping now, I kind of have an everywhere collection. Like I said, I don't really have a focus. I get what I like.
Yeah.
I have a pair of Eastern milk snakes, just because I think they're really underrated. I love,
for sure,
red and gray. The gray banded king snakes get so much love, and we have an Eastern milk snake on this side of the country, and lots of people don't give them love. So I've got a pair of them. I've got a little corn snake project. I've got a pair of Madagascarophis, Malagasy cat-eyed snakes.
I saw those, man, on your Instagram. They look great.
Yeah, I love
color.
Them gold phases ones.
Yeah.
And then I've got a trio of hognose, and that's about, and of course my chondro. I just stepped into the chondro world, but
nice.
That's about all I'm keeping right now.
What's the corn project?
The corn, I had a butter motley, and I paired it to a het A male female.
That's right.
Unfortunately, my corn project took a massive dive this year, because the female she had problems. She had like 3 stuck eggs, and I soaked her, and she wound up passing the 3. But the next day, when I found the 3 eggs, she had also ruptured, and unfortunately, I lost the adult female I had. So,
damn,
that's kind of on pause for a little while. But now I'm looking into trying to get some Kentucky locality corn snakes, just because they're geographically separated, so you get some cool patterns and colors from them.
That's awesome, man.
How far are you?
Go ahead, Smitty.
You go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask real quick: have you been to Northeast Kentucky where they have those crazy copperheads?
I have. I don't know how far northeast the crazy copperheads are. I have been to the Red River Gorge area, and I actually did find a copperhead there. I was looking for timber rattlesnakes, but all I found was a copperhead. But yeah, the copperhead there was gorgeous. It had a really darker red pattern than the ones we get on the western side of the state.
Yeah, because I know you're pretty far from those crazy aberrant gray ones and purple ones, but I know most people in Kentucky either keep them or have seen them and make it a mission to see them. So it's definitely on my bucket list. But go on, Smitty. What were we going to say?
I was asking, I mean, if how you're on the opposite. So Slade is like, if you go straight through South Carolina and into Kentucky, like that bottom right-hand corner, like Slade isn't that far. I want to say it's like a 7-hour drive, maybe. It's not terribly far, but are you on the other side of Kentucky from that?
Yeah. Actually, the county I grew up in was right next to Kentucky Lake. We're in the Jackson Purchase. The county I live currently is actually on the Mississippi River. I'm one county from the very far southwestern corner of Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
But I've been to Slade. I've been to the Reptile Zoo. That's when I went to Red River Gorge. It's about a 5-hour drive.
Okay. Yeah, I just remember looking at it on a map because I eventually would like to get up to the Kentucky Reptile Zoo to take a look around, and I follow them and have been for a long time, so it'd be really cool to go there and see it. But I remember looking it up, and it wasn't as far of a drive as I thought, because a lot of that drive was just going from one corner of South Carolina to the other, which you can reasonably cross South Carolina in like diagonal, like adjacently, like 5, maybe 6 hours, depending on where you're trying to go. So,
yeah. I feel people also underestimate the vastness of Kentucky too, because it almost goes as far north as it is east and west, right?
Yeah.
It almost reminds me of South Carolina upside down.
That's accurate.
Yeah. If you go to the Kentucky Reptile Zoo, basically the same exit that the Kentucky Reptile Zoo is off that main interstate. I can't remember. I think it's 75. The same exit 10 minutes down the road is the Red River Gorge. Mm-hmm. And it's gorgeous. It kind of reminds me of like the same type of layout of country as like Gatlinburg and Cherokee, Carolina. And so there's a whole lot of little tourist stuff, so you can make a family trip out of it. And when I went there actually for a training with work, but I spent all the time in the evenings and in the mornings herping. And I was, like I said, I was trying to find a timber rattlesnake. I don't even know if they're in that area, but it looked like really good habitat for them. I didn't do my homework as much because this was kind of a last minute training, but I did find some copperheads, but I reckon copperheads are everywhere there.
Yeah, when those things, man, when they're present, they're definitely present. That's for sure. There's usually no shortage of them.
That's honestly probably the most common snake I find when I go out road cruising, which I spend a lot of time road cruising in Land Between the Lakes, National Recreation Area. And like a typical night, I might find an eastern black king snake and a gray rat snake or 2, but like it's not unusual to find 10 plus copperheads crossing the road.
That's awesome. When you find the eastern black kings, are they smaller or are they larger? Because I've heard that the more, I don't want to say north and east you go, the smaller they get. But then I've heard ones that come out of Kentucky and northern Tennessee that are almost 4.5, 5 foot, whatever.
Most of mine I found has been on the smaller side. I have found a couple of pretty large ones, but most of the time when I find a large one, I think it's probably a female that I've either pulled out of a stump or something like that. Just about all of them I find crossing the road are smaller males.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. That's cool. It's awesome that you have all that by you, man. That's great.
Yeah, and like I said, I grew up in Cowley County. I was really lucky because there's only 2 counties in Kentucky that have all 4 of our venomous snakes, all 4 of our vipers, which is the cottonmouth, the copperhead, the timber rattlesnake, and we also have a very small population of the pygmy rattlesnake. The very northern tip of their range goes right around Kentucky Lake. So, and the 2 counties that have been documented to have pygmy rattlesnakes is Cowley County, the one I grew up in, and Trigg County, the one right next to it.
Nice. And your copperheads, or excuse me, your cottonmouths, those are Western, right?
I'm pretty sure that they're Western. Yes, they're
the heavily banded ones.
Yes,
that's awesome. That's
so
heavily
cool. Banded. Sometimes they'll have the flat black back, but there's always the big, wide, heavily banded.
Yeah, that's great, man. That's great. I've only ever played with one of them, and when my buddy Marcus was the herpetologist at a facility in Miami, we had one that was on loan from, I want to say, some zoo in Kentucky, like not Kentucky Reptile Park, but there was, where the hell was it? It was a zoo. It was on loan and for like exhibit swap or something. And that thing was the meanest cottonmouth I've ever messed with. And dude, it would throw venom because as it struck, it was crazy, but it was the most gorgeous, broad-banded cottonmouth I've ever seen. Awesome.
That's why.
Like when I go species.
What's that?
Are those still a subspecies?
Yeah. So there's 3 now. There's East, West, and Florida.
Oh.
Yep.
I know that a big hot spot for cottonmouths around here is, of course, Snake Road in Illinois.
Yeah.
And, where I live on the far western side, it's only about an hour and 20 minutes. So I've spent some time up there, and that's just amazing to walk up and down the road when they start moving, because you're literally like every 100 yards, there's another cottonmouth crossing the road.
Wow. That's awesome.
It's great.
That's cool, man.
I have wondered about that place in particular, how it's surprising to me that so many people can go to that spot on a regular basis and still find stuff, because you would think after a while things would be like, this isn't a good spot for me to be hanging out anymore. There's all these bipedal creatures walking around stopping me to take pictures, and
I think it has a lot to do with just the geographical layout, because one side of Snake Road, going toward Missouri, is all flatland. It's all like prairie almost. There is no hills or anything else. And then you all of a sudden come into this freshwater spring and swampland and these big limestone bluffs. And I think it's just the kind of the geographical isolation of those big limestone bluffs that makes such a good habitat that they don't leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also heard that it's almost all foot traffic with herpers out that way too, right? There's no vehicles, right?
Well, for I think it's 4 months out of the year, 2 months in spring, 2 months in the fall, they completely close off the road to cars.
Okay.
And that's when the snakes are leaving the limestone bluffs and going to the water in the spring, and coming out of the water and going back into the limestone bluffs in the fall. And so they completely close it off. And I mean, DNR, Department of Natural Resources in Illinois, is always out there. Collecting's illegal. You can't even carry a snake hook with you. It's literally a look, don't touch type ecosystem, and they keep a pretty close eye on it. So, I think that helps too, is that people aren't messing with them a whole lot.
Yeah. Right.
The cottonmouths I come across didn't even hardly, gape at you or anything. It's almost like they'd gotten used to it.
Yeah, that's still great. It's awesome.
Just trying to cross the damn road to go get something to eat. It's like, okay, I'll take some pictures.
Yeah. Okay, another big bearded guy.
Yeah, let me go. You've got what you needed. Carry on.
Yep.
So how does the going from aquaculture, did you take a lot from that and carry it over to herpetoculture?
I took some. It was kind of a stepped process, because I said the first thing I bought was a berm, but before I ever even really got completely rid of the fish tanks, I had set up a terrarium for dart frogs. And that was really similar, the whole bioactive thing, because what you're trying to accomplish in aquaculture is, almost a self-sustaining ecosystem.
Yeah, like a homeostasis.
Right. Just to change water, to keep some of your nitrosoma, bacteria in check. But, you're wanting to keep it like an ecosystem that takes care of itself. So switching over to the bioactive was really similar. Switching to the snakes, I mean, there's some things I took out of it, like just I think I'm a little more anal about water quality than a lot of people. But you can see I've got deli cups stacked up as my water bowls, just because I know what all funk can grow in the water. So that's just the easiest way for me to minimize that risk, is just by swapping them out, even though it isn't great for the ecosystem, but it minimizes the risk to my collection. So there's some things I definitely did take from it, but there's not a whole lot. It's really different in a lot of ways, but just staying on top of your maintenance is one of the lessons you learn. Get a schedule for your maintenance, take care of things when you see it, because if you don't, it'll get worse.
Oh yeah, that's great, man.
Were you doing saltwater or freshwater?
I've done mostly freshwater. I kept goodies, which are these little Mexican live bears. They're a lot of them are extinct in the wild or critically endangered. And in aquaculture, we can keep stuff like that, even though in herpetoculture you can't. But I kept a lot of them. I did have one nano saltwater reef tank, and I only wanted one of them because I had more time on that tank than I did the other 16 combined.
Yeah.
Wow.
My dad tried saltwater briefly, and it was I won't say it was a disaster, but he threw in the towel on it very quickly.
I had 2 or 3 cyano outbreaks, that red algae, and it's just a nightmare. And you have so much rough surfaces that you've attached all your coral to try to get it off. And if you don't get it all, it's going to come back. And it's just, yeah.
I think part of his problem was he really swung for the fences, and I want to say he started with, like, at a minimum it was a 75-gallon aquarium, and the algae would not stop. He could not keep it under control, and then fish started dropping, and he just finally was like, "This is too much. I can't."
Yeah, I always heard that bigger aquariums though are better, because like the saying in aquaculture was, the solution to pollution is dilution. So more water, the easier it is to keep your parameters in check. But first off, I'm not made of money, and saltwater aquariums are expensive. So 20 gallons all I want to try. And I had to stay on top of it. I had to keep it topped off every day, because as water evaporates, the salinity will go up. And it's just a whole bunch of little bitty things that you had to stay on top of.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy because you think about what, like, we as a hobby / community or industry, whatever you want to call it, like what we had to learn as far as the growing pains of trial and error over the last 30 plus years. I feel like it was even more like your margin for error is so much slimmer when it comes to the fish and stuff like that, because it's like even the smallest thing could be off.
Yeah.
But I feel like you also have so much going on in those tanks in terms of like the balance of everything, between the water and the salinity and the bacteria and all the things you got to have sort of just right. And it's like, imagine how many times, like, I think about condors in particular and how Trooper and those guys learning how to just incubate them to where you could get them to hatch, and like the trial and error and years it took of figuring that out till we finally got it to where we are now. But then with fish, like, the smallest thing was off and stuff died. And so now you got to continually, like, just ping pong back and forth trying to get it right. And I feel like it probably took way longer just to get that kind of stuff figured out to where they could tell people, like, okay, this is what we figured out we're doing wrong. This is what we should probably start doing as a whole.
Yeah.
To have more success.
One way though that the fish hobby, I think, kind of outpaces us in some ways is, like, you can go and find a out of the box ready to set up fish tank that has, you'll spend a pretty penny on it, but like some of the reef tanks, some of the higher end stuff, you can spend $3,500 and they have the sump pump and they have the automatic computer system that automatically checks the calcium and the kalkwasser and all that stuff. And, that's something that as a whole and as a hobby, we haven't done. There's not a whole lot of companies going out there, and it may be a money thing. It may be just because the reptile hobby isn't as popular as the fish hobby, but we don't have a whole lot of companies going out and building from the bottom up setups and things to deal with the things that we have going wrong.
Yeah,
I think a lot of that is just out of necessity, mostly. I mean, people were tired of spending money on these tanks and these fish for stuff to keep dying and having to restart. That they finally, the people that had the ability and the technology and stuff and money, put in the work to create stuff like that fills that gap of that technology and stuff. So I think that's a big part of it, because it is. We hear that a lot. People talking about how much further ahead aquaculture is in comparison to herpetoculture. And I think it's a combination of that necessity, but also the fact that aquaculture is overall, I think, more popular and
it's more socially acceptable.
Been around longer, and that necessity, I think, is just a big part of it. People got tired of spending money on fish just for them to die.
Well, I also think there's a lot more people that want a fish tank, and they are not like no doctor's office says, I want to put a snake on display, or I want to put dart frogs on display, and the owner of the clinic or the owner of the practice is not into snakes or dart frogs. While there are plenty of doctors' offices and dentists' offices that have a massive reef tank where they just pay someone to take care of it because it's just decor to them, So I think it's just way more socially acceptable in that regard. But
that was something I had thought about doing at one point with the darts, was like going to some of the local doctor's offices and stuff and being like, look, like for X amount, like I'll set up a tank with dart frogs.
Yeah.
And like come and take care of it and something along those lines. And my vet buddy that I was living with at the time, he was like, dude, you should totally do that. And I just never really pursued it because I just didn't see people getting on board with it really until it's one of those things where if you see it firsthand, like you see a really nice tank that's put together and you see the frogs hopping around in it, and then they'd be like, okay, I get it. And then having to keep up with fruit fly cultures even more than I was before, that was
I had an acquaintance that did fish tanks, and like he would go to the doctor's office and do their water changes once a week or once a month or whatever it was. And he had a couple places that had dart frogs, but what wound up happening is YouTube came around and they're like, okay, I don't have to worry about nitrate levels or nitrite levels or phosphate levels or ammonia levels or pH balance or salinity levels. I just have to learn how to prune some plants, scrape some funk off the glass, and throw flies in. And they basically YouTubed him out, if that makes sense. And obviously I'm generalizing. I'm not saying dart frogs are that easy. I'm just making a generalization as to how my buddy lost those gigs. But
there's such a natural fit though for people wanting to get into herps that fill a similar void to the fish and aquascapes and things like that. Like I wish at the time that my dad had that giant saltwater tank, that if he had got that tank and then said, what should I put in it? I would have said dart frogs in a heartbeat, because he could have had a really cool group of Tinctorius or something in that, and it would have been awesome,
Yeah, I mean, my experience with the dart frogs was they were pretty easy once you got the tank set up. Once the plants were rooted, once the all the isopods and springtails and stuff got to going and all that, they were pretty easy. And I was like you, Justin, the worst part of it was keeping the fruit fly cultures going, because it took me a long time to figure out the timing on that, like to be able to have one going all the time. Because I'd get to where I'd set one up and then I'd try to be feeding off of it too early and it wouldn't really produce. And it took me a long time to get that down. And I got that pretty well down. The only reason I don't have the dart frogs still is because they actually wound up escaping from a tank, and I still don't know how they escaped. But I found the crispy critter underneath them.
Oh,
That's
what
rough,
species
man.
was it?
It was Dendrobatus auratus. It was
Okay.
auratus.
Yeah.
El Cope was the
Oh, nice.
locality.
Mhm.
But I still have that tank, and I've actually thought about trying to get a group of morning geckos going, just for mainly because they'll keep on producing. You don't have to do as many fruit flies. You can just supplement with them, and might be good to get maybe some stubborn small feeders eating with the morning geckos, because they,
Yeah.
even adults, they're just so small.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with the cat-eyed snakes and the hognose. Sure.
Yeah, I always for me, like the fruit fly cultures, I'd get I'd either make a new batch or I'd buy a new batch because I was waiting on another batch to sort of start taking off. And for some reason, the last couple batches that I had either started making or bought crashed very quickly. And so then it got to the point where I was like completely out of fruit flies. And it's like, well, now I got to order 4 more cultures. And I would usually get them off eBay because that seemed to be the most cost effective way to do it. But they were still like $10 a culture. So it's like I'd spend the $40, get 4 cultures, and then within like inside of 2 weeks they die, and I'm like, what the hell? So I'd shell out another $40, and I get these cultures, and like same thing would happen. It finally got to the point where it's like I just can't. Like once you fall behind, unless you're making a ton of cultures at the same time, once you kind of fall behind on those, it's stressful. But then I should have. I think they're called peanut beetles. They're basically like miniature mealworms, like the smallest version of that, and that's a good option for darts too. But I never got my hands on them. I'd get some in like my dubia colonies for some reason periodically. I don't know if it was just a coincidence, but I wish I had started a nice group of those, because that would have been a great alternative.
With your dubia, did you use egg carton?
Yeah.
Dude, I feel like, because from all the years working in pet shops, I would see those things all the time in both cricket and dubia colonies, and I think they're in the egg carton.
It's entirely possible.
And like they just show up. You know? Yeah,
because they are the perfect size for darts.
Yeah,
we got those worms are tiny. The newborn stuff. So
yeah, we got spoiled down by me because. Actually, my county, like Broward, there's a ton of dart people, and when I was younger, say 20 years ago, whatever, there was a ton of Mantella people too, and especially in the Fort Lauderdale area, and you had like 4 or 5 guys that were religiously pumping out Heidi-eye, and like almost every pet shop had cultures on the cash register counter like right before you leave, and you're like, oh wow, you sell flightless Heidi-eye? Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool. So like there was people always had fruit flies down by me. It's probably dried up a little bit because people, I'm sure, get a lot of stuff online, but because way more online now. But man, it was never a question of can I feed my darts,
Yeah, I think that was the problem is I just wasn't making enough cultures. Like if you go wide and you start with a good handful of them, I think it makes it much easier to sort of stay on top of them. And I do want to get back into darts at some point when I have a little more space, because seeing Matt and Jamie getting theirs at Daytona, like I was at Paul Shore's table, because he's usually at a lot of the shows here in the Southeast, and he sells, breeds a ton of different dart frog species. And I was talking to Matt and Jamie because they were wanting to get some thumbnails or something for their tank they were building, and I was telling them how much I loved Ranitomea, and so we're sitting there and I'm looking at them and talking about them, and I was like, fuck, I miss these things, man. They're so much fun. Yeah, peanut beetles, I think, is what they are. I don't think they were bean beetles.
Yeah, they were telling me
there's some people you can get them from. Like you can get peanut beetles. For some reason, starter groups of those they're not really like cheap in comparison to other feeders, but I think it's like mealworms. Like once you get them going, you're good. You're not going to have to worry about it again.
I got reached out to by a company that wanted me to try black soldier fly larva, and I wound up not following through with it just because life, and I don't have that many insect feeding animals as it is, and they want to send me like boxes of these friggin' things. I guess they thought that I had like a gecko farm or something, but it looked really cool. I never messed with them, and I guess there is a smaller one that you can feed to, like, you know, some tinks and
Is it really?
yeah, and it looked good, man. It looked good. It just looked like it may have been too fresh and taboo for people to really jump on it, but I guess people are actually using it.
I would be worried about, I mean, supplementing them here and there would be fine, but given how packed with like fat and protein BSF larvae are,
yeah, because they're like waxworm size, right?
A little bit smaller.
A little bit smaller, okay.
But you would have a pretty fat frog very quickly, because anytime when I was keeping cresteds, I'd use the red label Pangea, which has ground up BSF larvae in it.
Right.
And if I wanted something to like put on weight or get babies really going, dude, that stuff was like steroids, man. It was
really,
yeah. So I mean, they're awesome. They're a great option for feeders, especially if you have something that needs to put on weight, like those and waxworms. I think are awesome options for that. But as far as like it being a main like regular part of the diet, outside of like 1 day a week or something, I think you'd have some pretty obese frogs pretty quick.
Fair enough.
Given how much they eat, man.
Yeah, and I also kind of shied away from it because I tried waxworms with the knobtails, and dude, if it's not like on the move, they don't give a crap, you know. So it was there. I tried maybe 5-10 times, and I just had little bowls full of dead worms, and I was like, "This is stupid. It's a waste of money."
Yeah.
But
I looked into, man, I don't know if you've ever seen the process of how people harvest the black soldier fly larvae.
No.
Because at one point I was like, oh, this would be, if they're not too difficult, like this would be a cool option to try and do myself. But it's like way more involved than other feeders. Like you got to have like this really just bizarre setup, and it's a whole thing. But see, Patrick said he was using black soldier fly years before they got popular to feed fish. I raised parrots, and the black soldier flies lay eggs and parrot poop under the cages. Yeah, so
wow, it's a hell of a recycling. I like it.
Yeah, basically what it was is like you'd have more or less a compost bin that sits under this screen cage, and then the flies would do their thing, and then the larvae would be growing in that compost beneath, and there would be some way that you would sort them out from that, and it's pretty interesting. And the flies themselves are actually pretty cool. They look so much like a wasp. Like they look really pretty intimidating, but they're completely harmless.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
How's the chondro doing?
It's doing good. It's ate every time I've tried to feed it. Yeah, I haven't had any trouble with it. You may find some wood to knock on. No trouble with it so far. So yeah, I was a little nervous about getting a chondro just because you hear so many people say, "Oh, it's the easiest snake you can keep," and then you also hear other people say, "Well, I got a chondro and it died a week later." So I was just like, "All right, which one's mine going to be?" So.
No, I think you started out on the right foot by getting captive bred, and
yeah,
I got it from Buddy Buscemi, and I know he's been breeding them for a long time and has a pretty solid reputation. So that was the one I got.
Yeah, man, you're keeping a great collection of different species, and I have no qualms. You'll be perfectly fine.
Yeah, if it's eating regular, you're on a good track.
The only snake that's given me trouble so far was one of my Madagascarophis. Not the female. The female eats every time you open up the cage at night, and it's ready to go. Mm-hmm. But the male, for a long time, just would not eat. So I got to where I was assist feeding it. It was the easiest snake I've ever assist fed, period, bar none. I mean, you could literally just get the pinky's nose started in its mouth, and it would go ahead and take it down. Nice. But for a long time, I had to do that, and I got to where I was wasting two pinkies a week on it because I'd lay one in its cage overnight, see if it'd eat, and then when it didn't, I'd thaw out another one the next morning and feed it. And now it's gotten to, though, finally in like the last 3 weeks, it's gotten to where the pinky's gone every morning when I come back. So
that's good.
I'm over that.
That's good. Who'd you get them from?
Them I got from Thomas Bailey.
Ah, dude, Tom Bailey and I go way back, man. He used to live around the corner from me.
Yeah, I ordered them from Tom Bailey, and he moved up to Kentucky, so he was in the state, so he sent them to me, and he said he had been breeding them for several years.
Oh yeah, man, dude, Tom's had those gold phase ones for at least 15 years, 10, 15 years, and he was one of the only guys doing those gold phases for a while, and that was one of those things where it's like, I just like the species, so I'm just gonna have them and breed them, and he was killing it. So, dude, his line is gorgeous and healthy, and I'm glad you got him from Tom. It's good stuff, man.
That's a really cool species too that I've had opportunities to get my hands on, and just the timing was never great.
Yeah, I mean, really, the only other times I've seen them, I mean, I know there's some people out there working with them, but most of the time when I've seen them, they were coming in wild caught, and I kind of put them in the same bucket that I put paradise snakes and some of those other things that I'm like, that's cool, but what's the chances I'll ever get it to eating? And then actually the CCR episode come out, and I forgot who they were interviewing that breeds them, but he was talking about how easy they were to get started on mice once you got them to eating it a few times. And that really, I was like, all right, that's cool. I want to try some. So I got a pair of them, and I like them. Yeah,
man. That's good stuff, man. That's great. Small world, right?
Absolutely.
That's cool, man.
Especially in the herpetoculture world, it gets smaller.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm going to show these pictures that Dustin sent me yesterday.
Yeah, let's get into some of the farm stuff.
The tobacco stuff.
Tobacco.
See, this I just found interesting in comparison to what we see with like cigar tobacco.
Right.
Because those leaves look like way waxier, and the plants themselves look just different.
Yeah, I feel like they're larger too, right?
Yeah, that was particularly the reason why we took a picture was that was particularly a really good heavy year. What you're looking for with smokeless tobacco is people say the average is about 4,000 pounds per acre. And what that is basically of just the leaves, because that's all you sell at the tobacco floor is the leaves. So that was in particular a really good year. And I think that year we wound up breaking like 4,700 pounds per acre. So I mean, there was some really monstrous leaves in that particular year.
Wow, that's awesome.
And then this I thought was interesting. So if you've ever had Drew Estate, they have a cigar line called the Kentucky Fire Cured, and it is basically they do this with that tobacco, which is it's fire cured, so it has a very smoky, barbecue-y type flavor to it.
Oh yeah.
Some people like it, some people don't. I'm on the fence about it. I've had them in the past, and I feel like they're not as good as they used to be. It could just be me, but they sort of rack them up like this. And typically down with cigar tobacco down south, like they do this same thing, but they have them in these giant barns basically. And it's not fire cured; it's like air cured for however long, depending on what the leaf is being used for. So they'll just have like stories of these tobacco leaves, sort of set on these poles, which we'll go back to this in a second. Kind of like this, but inside, just racked up. And
So Dustin, how tall is that ceiling that we're looking at?
That is probably about 6 foot, 5.5 to 6 foot to the end of the tips of the leaves. But that is it's 4 tiers high.
Oh wow.
So the tobacco stacked up on the tobacco sticks. You spike them on the tobacco stick, and then you lay them on the rafters, and it goes up 4 tiers high. And the thing about tobacco that I think a lot of people don't understand is everything that's done in a tobacco field just about is done by hand. You can't take machinery in there because you'll just tear it up. And I was telling Justin, I've laid brick, I've done a little bit of floor laying and roofing and that kind of stuff. And a tobacco field is by far the most labor intensive hard work I've ever done. And I
Wow.
but the firing process, this barn I think was one of our newer barns, so it was 10. But there's a whole lot of barns that are still being fired in this part of the country that are literally log barns that might be 100 years old.
Wow.
So I was telling Justin, there's a real art to that. Is you'll take those hardwood slabs and lay them. That's called a windrow. So you lay them in rows like that, and then you put the sawdust on top, so they burn more like a cigarette. They don't flame. They just kind of smoke and ember down. Because you can't have open flame. Because what you'll do is you'll light these fires, you'll let them get burnt down into where they're coals, and then you shut up the doors and you leave. And it's got to burn the rest of the way out, which could take 2, 3, 4 days to burn out. And you'll go in every now and then and check. But I was telling Justin, if you get it too hot, the leaves will start slipping off the stalk and fall to the bottom, and that will cause your barn to catch on fire. And if you have it too cold, then the leaves will start rotting and breaking, and they'll fall to the bottom, and that'll catch your barn on fire. So there's just a sweet spot there for temperature and how you set it up to keep from losing the entire barn by fire. And I mean, every year there's several farmers around that lose a barn because something happened, and you can't sit there and watch it the whole time, because like my dad on a good year, he'd have 11 or 12 of these barns going at one time.
Wow.
So you have to put them in, shut it up, and leave it. And like I was saying, that's a windrow orientation where it's just rows of slabs with sawdust. And some people would also do what's called a bed. And you usually would want to do a bed when you wanted the barn to get hotter. Like if the leaves were starting to rot, it was starting to slip, and you wanted to get a lot of heat really quick, you'd lay the slabs in rows like that, and then you'd crisscross them. And then you'd go in and dump the sawdust on them, and you'd set fires like in the middle and on all 4 corners, so it'd burn in and out at the same time to really raise the heat and the smoke in there to try to cure it out and dry it out.
Wow. Let me just paint a picture for the people listening and not watching this. So the photo we're looking at is essentially a barn in a long hallway, basically. And the tobacco leaves are hung from the ceiling in tiers, and you see the leaves just dangling from the ceiling. And then on the floor is kind of like lands and grooves almost with flame and heat on the ground, making that heat rise to get to the leaves that are hanging from the ceiling. So what's the propellant that they're using? It's just sawdust?
It's just sawdust. Sometimes we would have to start the fires with a little bit of charcoal lighter fluid or something like that. But if you'd have to start the fires like that, you had to leave both doors open. That's probably the reason why both doors are open like that. That way you get all those fumes in a crosswind getting out, because all you want the flavor on the tobacco is just the wood.
Yeah. So now I see little flames in the picture. Is that it's just the slow creep of the flame going through the sawdust?
That was newly started fires. We had just went through with like little pieces of bark, wiped it, raked out the sawdust, and just started the fires. And that's me just taking a picture because we was just sitting there and waiting for them to actually start turning more into coals and die down the flames. That way we could close up the barn and leave it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Super cool. You never see photos like this. It's incredible.
But yeah, those barns, I have one of my kind of, I guess, standoffishness to keeping some arachnids is I know that, arachnid venom can be similar to some insect venom. And those barns like that, I'm certain, is the reason why I'm allergic to wasps, because you only open them up every fall. And when you open them up and you climb the tiers, just about every new barn you opened, you was going to get stung at some point before the day was over with. And I got stung so many times, I actually developed an allergic reaction to it. I've never had to go into anaphylaxis, but it's going that way. If I get stung, I'm in trouble.
Damn. So what do we got here, Smitty? What are we looking at? You're muted. Justin, you're muted. Is he frozen?
No, I'm not. I was coughing.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, it's fine.
Yeah, so this is just another sort of example of something similar.
Nice.
I need to find another. Let me see. There's a really good example of how they cure them when they're like for cigars with the same sort of buildings, but not fire cured necessarily, just regular cured.
One of my neighbors, he had a bunch of air cured tobacco, and he actually wound up renting out what used to be hog barns. In my county, they passed an ordinance saying that you could not have hog barns anymore. So, the hog barns, you can imagine, they're kind of like the chicken houses. They're really long and thin. And he rented out a bunch of them because they had rafters that would fit tobacco sticks in it, and he could open up both sides, and they even had fans hooked up where he could turn them on every now and then just to off gas the tobacco, and he had that hog barn filled full of air cured tobacco.
That's cool.
Let's see here. Yeah, so this is like air curing.
Wow.
Those are all just on sticks, like Dustin was saying, sort of draped over, and then those are laid across, I guess, sort of like rafter type deals that go up.
Now, are those, I can't see, are those actually on the stalk, or are they just the leaves bundled?
They should still be on the stalk.
Okay. That's what I was wondering. I didn't know with cigar tobacco how that was done, because I knew that sometimes burley, they would just bundle the leaves and like wire tie them. And hang them.
Yeah.
But I didn't know with cigars if they left them on the stalk or not.
Yeah, most of them, I believe they do.
Yeah, I feel like there's still a bunch of oils that are still flowing and moving, and vessels contracting, expanding inside the stalk. And I think they want to harness as much of that for as long as possible, I think.
Yeah, so here's curing barns. Here's a good example. So these cross sticks, like these logs you're seeing, those are what they'll drape the leaves over, and it just goes up. And I'm not sure exactly if it's depending on like what they're going for, what the leaf is, like which part of the cigar they're using it for, if it dictates how high up it goes or not. But yeah, it gets pretty hot in there.
Wow, man, look at that.
But again, all manual labor. Like people, there's no machines or like lifts going up there, putting this dudes climbing up there.
Yeah.
And going up there and checking on them and making sure they're where they need to be. And I don't even know what that is. It's probably just some string they use to tie it together.
Probably seagrass string. That's what most of the bales and stuff would be seagrass string. I don't know why the reason for that is, but that's what the tobacco companies most of the time want you to use.
Yeah, see, these don't look like they're on the stalk. These look like they're draped over.
Yeah. Yeah, so now just what we're looking at is a big open barn with hundreds of wooden beams that just go across the barn from left to right, and just thousands of plant leaves draped over them, and the different stages of the leaves curing. Some of them are bright neon green, some of them are dark brown, and just the people laboring very sweatily, as I may say, and climbing these rafters to hang these leaves. It's incredible. I mean, huge facilities, huge barns. I mean, easily the size of a high school gymnasium minimum. Wow.
Yeah, that's wild.
Gorgeous countryside.
So then, with the cutting process, something that is really interesting about tobacco, and one of the reasons why working in the tobacco field can be dangerous is I don't know if y'all have ever been around green tobacco, but it almost has like a gum to it.
Yeah, I've heard.
they call it tobacco gum. It's sticky, but it's not like glue sticky. It's just like it sticks to you and it gets on you. And you got to think where we're at in Western Kentucky in August, which is usually the time that you're cutting tobacco, which is by far the hardest manual part of the patch. It is, 100-degree heat indexes and 98% humidity. We're right in between the Mississippi River and Kentucky Lake. Really high humidity, really high heat indexes. You're in the middle of the field, and that gum will get on your skin, and it'll get on it to the point that it actually blocks up your sweat pores. So you can stop sweating where you're not covered with clothing. And that's why a lot of times you'll see people working in a tobacco patch with thin, long sleeve shirts, because then the gum gets on the shirt instead of on your skin and blocks it up. But you run a really high chance of getting either heat exhaustion or heat stroke, because the gum blocks up your sweat pores and makes it harder for you to sweat. That, and you can also take in nicotine through your skin if it's wet and get nicotine poisoning.
Wow. That's wild. I would have never thought of that.
It's a powerful plant, man.
And you'll get really sick if you get nicotine poisoning. And it's kind of funny because, growing up in it, we didn't think about that, especially in the 90s. I was 7, 8 years old out there topping and rolling tobacco with the rest of them. And so I probably developed a nicotine addiction before I hit double digits, but just being in the field.
Wow. So what made so your family was tobacco farmers for smokeless tobacco? Was there a reason for that, or was it just like the trend of the time, or what?
I think it has more to do with geographical area. For whatever reason, Callaway County and Graves County, I don't know if this figure is still accurate, but at one point I'd heard that between Callaway County and Graves County, these two counties in Western Kentucky produce like 92% of the snuff for the U.S.
Oh, wow.
I guess it's because of we're in what's called the black patch. When you turn over the soil out here, it's just like really dark soil. And I guess it has to do with the soil structure and us having the dark firing history to have smokeless tobacco. Because like all over Kentucky, there's tobacco, but the farther you go east, you get like burley, and it's all
right.
And what we actually have is a plant. Justin probably knows this plant better than I do. My dad always called it narrowleaf Mado. I don't know if it's actually Mado or if it's actually Maduro, but it's narrowleaf Mado, and that's that darker, the real dark green, almost army green colored tobacco. When you drive by a tobacco patch and you see the real light green, almost yellow, that's usually burley.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the darker one, because a lot of, as far as like tobacco that's grown in the States for cigars, the Connecticut River Valley is kind of one of the main ones. Just because Connecticut, that region in particular, is a lot like Ecuador and other parts where it's just naturally overcast, a good bit of the year, and it makes it good for more or less shade-grown tobacco. But then Florida started using some for cigars, but for the most part, anywhere else in the U.S., it's going to be for smokeless tobacco, cigarette tobacco, or like pipe tobacco.
And I know Dad got approached by some company out of Nashville that was doing cigar tobacco, and I think he tried it for 1 year, like taking some of the leaf. I know that he made a cutter to cut the stems off, but he made it out of a piece of oil pipe and a sharpened blade because my dad's a redneck. But
that's great.
He had it for 1 year, and he just decided that it wasn't for him, even though it fetched a higher price per pound. It wasn't worth the extra step when we're already producing for it. We're already set up for the smokeless. So it wasn't worth the extra step to do that versus doing it for the smokeless.
So when you guys sell the cured leaf, are you guys doing anything in preparation for distribution? Like, do you guys grind it? Do you guys chop it? Or are you just selling whole leaf, cured leaf?
We don't grind or chop. We sell the full leaf, but what we have to do is it's called stripping tobacco. You take it all down from that barn, and then you do what's called getting it in order, which we had a big plastic sheet room that we'd pull the whole wagon in, and you turn on a steamer. And the steamer, we had a metal pipe that would go underneath the wagon, and it'd steam the tobacco for like 10 minutes. And that dried tobacco that had been fire cured would retain a whole lot of moisture.
Yeah.
So it'd be pliable. And then you'd bring it all in a heated barn, because we're usually doing this in like November and December. Picking it all off of the stalk and classing it by different classes on how good the leaf is.
Wow.
Okay. They do that with cigars too?
Yeah. Typically, there used to be 3 classes. There used to be leaf, seconds, and lugs. And then before we quit, all of U.S. Smokeless just had 2 classes, which was just leaf and lugs. And then they had trash too. But the leaf and the lugs, you would take, usually it was the first, like top third of the tobacco plant would be the leaf, because the leaves toward the top of the tobacco plant would be usually less roughed up. They hadn't been drug in the mud. They didn't have mud on them. They usually had less holes because they'd been on the plant less time to get attacked by pests or anything. So usually about the top third would be leaf, and you would put it in what we'd call a flake box, and then you take the other bottom half, and put it in another flake box, and that would be leaf and lug. And in those flake boxes, they were basically just plywood boxes that was covered on 2 ends, and then they were about 5 inches wide. And you just stuff as much as you possibly could into that plywood box and put your knee on it and everything.
Wow.
Just to get it as compact as you could. And then you pull it out in flakes, and you stack it up on they called them tobacco heads, or the baskets that we'd actually take to the sale. And then we'd stack those in orientation so that they'd get stacked up.
That's crazy.
On the trailer and take them.
That's wild, man. So in one of those, all right, so in that fire cure barn we saw,
Mm-hmm.
one row, one tier, how many boxes would that be? Ballpark. 100?
Probably flake boxes or big boxes.
Both.
Big
ballpark,
boxes,
man. Yeah.
Big boxes would probably be about 40.
Okay.
Big boxes, and probably every flake would have, according to how heavy the tobacco was, between 150 and 200 flakes per box.
Wow. That's wild, man.
Because
and it's all by hand. That's crazy.
It's all by hand.
Just pitching it like bales of hay on a wagon, man. That's wild.
Yeah, even the planting of the tobacco, it's not like you can just go through and plant seeds. You start seedlings on a waterbed most of the time now, and then they actually take a push mower and like run across the top of them to strengthen up the plant. Because if you didn't, the plant would just be really spindly. And then the setter is what we called it. It was a machine. It looked like it comes straight out of the 1920s that you pulled behind a tractor, and you would set 4 people on this setter, and you'd have to pull the plants out of the trays. And then these little fingers would come by, and you'd have to lay the tobacco in the finger in the right orientation, and then it'd take it down and they'd set it in the ground. Wow. And so you had to even ride the setter to plant it all.
That's crazy.
My dad at one point, we would, between him and the farmers around us that he helped on, he was a farm manager, they had probably 10,000 acres of row crop, soybean and corn. And by far, that was a drop in the bucket compared to the 50 acres of dark fire that we had.
Wow.
Crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah, man. All that soybean and corn, man. You sell that off to feed the livestock, man. That's people don't realize how much space you need. Yeah, exactly.
Combine tractor, it's pretty much all by machine. You're loading the seed, that's about it. But with tobacco, 90% of it is not, you can't do by machine.
Yeah, that's nuts, man. Yeah, when I was a kid, we had about 50 acres of corn and about 20 acres of soybean, and we had about 100 acres that was all horse paddock. And my grandfather would pay a guy to combine the corn, and then I guess he used the leaf and stalk for something, and he would keep that, and then he would mash all the corn for us to do just like cow corn.
Mm-hmm.
And because we had like, I don't know, 20 head of Herefordshire, nothing crazy. And then the soybean, we would just pay a guy to let me rephrase that. we would have a guy harvest it and plow it for us and then keep like 20%. And it was nothing, man. It's crazy how much space you need for those row crop for the little amount that is worth it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And my dad, or not my dad, my granddad raised Charolais cattle. So I had some experience with the Charolais cattle and the hayfield through that too. But
yeah, man, that's wild. So what are we looking at here, Dustin?
This is how they ferment cigar tobacco. Typically, they put them in these giant piles called pilons, and I guess it's similar to sort of what Dustin was talking about. Just instead of it being put in a box, they put them in these giant, like, I don't know how it's. I forget the weight they said that some of these pilons will weigh, but they leave them in these and they ferment them in a specialized area that is high heat, high humidity.
How big is that? What's it, like 20 foot by 20 foot? Or is it bigger?
Couldn't even tell you. They might even be bigger than that. But here's another.
Wow.
That's interesting because that tobacco they have, they're doing. It's a little different than the flake that we was doing at the end. It looked like it was hand tied, and if you look up a hand tied tobacco bundle, people would get really in depth about how pretty their hand ties were.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when that was still a thing, when we still done that. And later on, they had us just doing the flakes because it's quicker. But my grandmother used to always brag about how pretty her hand ties was. So they'd take a bundle of leaves and put them together, and then take the leaf itself and wrap around the outside and tuck it through and wrap it around so that you had this really pretty hand tie.
That's awesome.
And it looks like those piles of the cigar tobacco, they were all hand-tied bundles.
Yeah, it's just, man, it's funny how it's just like the smallest stuff.
And it just goes to show you, man, like of all the crops that we cultivate, so few are still an art form,
Yeah.
And it's just like doesn't matter if it's the smokeless, if it's pipe tobacco, if it's cigars, like it's all an art form, man.
Yeah, all those are hand-tied.
Oh wow, yeah, look at that.
See the knobs at the end where all the leaves are bundled together?
Yeah.
That's a hand tie.
Yep. Yeah, they even wrap some of them. See them in the background there. An extended period of time until they're right, and what they say 2,500 to 4,000 pounds.
Wow,
is a pilon.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. But that's to kind of give you reference for size there. I mean, it's the size of a sedan, more or less.
Yeah.
And then they inspect them as they go to see where they're at, kind of determine how it goes from there. And then they sort, like Dustin was saying. I know for like wrappers and stuff, they try to get them to match color-wise as best as they can, so there's consistency there. I think some companies worry about that more than others.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, everything, like, this is what separates cigars from every other tobacco product in particular, at least in comparison to like cigarettes, is like it's 100% handmade. There's no additives or anything like that. It's 100% natural. And I'm not saying anybody should run out and go start smoking, but there is a difference between premium cigars and cigarettes. How they can even call cigarette tobacco by the time they're done with it, with all the stuff they add to it, is is crazy. But that's a chivetta, which is what the little knife they use to cut for wrapping.
And it's kind of the same thing with the smokeless tobacco too, because my whole life we'd haul it off to the U.S. Smokeless factory, and like as we're unloading it, they're running it through a grinder. They're grinding it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm pretty sure that for like some of the higher end snuffs, like Skull, Copenhagen, that kind of stuff, a lot of what differentiates that is what class of leaf it goes in it and also how long it ferments. But I'm pretty sure they
Right.
ferment them like barrels, like whiskey almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, which a handful of companies do that as well. Perdomo has their barrel aged stuff, which he literally has just barrels full of tobacco, and there's a couple brands that have done like a sherry cask aged, and so there's definitely different ways people do it depending on what they're going for. But like if you ever watch some of these people roll cigars, like people think it's just as easy as bundling leaves together and rolling them. Like it's way more involved. Some companies even do like they draw test all their cigars to make sure there's good airflow through them. It's a process, and a lot of times too, like they'll put them together in these they're half wheels, like a big bundle of cigars, and they'll weigh them, and they can tell if there's like imperfections in that group by the weight.
Wow,
which is pretty interesting.
Rolling cigars, I have a healthy respect for, just from what I was telling y'all earlier about the hand tying. Because I mean, that when you very first try to learn how to do that, you're going to rip 100 leaves trying to do it.
Yeah.
So the fact that they can roll a cigar as tightly and as precisely as they do is just nothing short of incredible, having experience with those leaves.
Did you guys have a lot of, at least in the tobacco side of things, was there still a lot of like rodents and pests and things like that you would?
Not really as far as rodents.
Soy.
Yeah. We didn't have many rodent problems for whatever reason. The rodents, I don't know if they just didn't like the tobacco or what, but where most of our pest problems come from was during the actual growing process, like the hornworms. The same hornworms that we feed bearded dragons. They would make short work of a tobacco patch.
Wow.
If you got them in your tobacco patch, you're in trouble. And also grasshoppers. Grasshoppers and hornworms both were big pests to have on the tobacco patch.
Did you ever encounter mammals that were, for lack of a better word, addicted to nicotine? Because I've heard of farmers who have like their own tobacco patch just for like a hobby, and what they'll do is they'll put some of the clippings in their compost heap, whatever, and all of a sudden now they got deer literally salivating like, when are you gonna cut that plant down? And because the local wildlife is just hooked on nicotine.
I never did.
Okay.
One of my dad's neighbors, he was losing a whole lot of leaves in his tobacco patch, the bottom leaves, and he took the leaf to our local ASCS office, which is like our local agriculture office. And the ASCS office told him that it was rabbits that had gotten a taste for tobacco.
Really?
And yeah, and I don't know how much truth there was in it, but me and my dad made fun of him, and we found a 7-foot Easter bunny at Walmart and blew it up and set it in his patch.
That's awesome.
But yeah, he did report, the ASS office said that it was rabbits that had gotten a taste for his tobacco. And I don't remember seeing, if there was any damage from mammals, it wasn't significant enough for us to notice. Yeah. But it was not uncommon for us to run rabbits out of the field, just because the leaves are so big and so broad, and in a hot day and underneath the tobacco, it was relatively cool because that ground stayed shaded all the time once the leaves got some size upon them. So like I said, it was a wonderland for all sorts of different wildlife down at the ground level in a tobacco patch.
Wow. So this video you're playing, Justin, is fantastic.
Yeah, just to kind of give you an idea of, like, if that they're rolling torpedoes, so that should mean that this roller in particular is one of their higher tier ones, because they are sort of like rated on a scale in terms of like abilities, and torpedoes typically are rolled by the better of the factory rollers. So, but yeah, I mean, that's like you can see the whole thing's done by hand. There's like no machines doing it. And even then, like, you're looking at, so like that's a wrapper that she's cutting right now to wrap the filler and binder. And they're not even using like the entire leaf. Like they're really only using, maybe half of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then she checks the ring gauge to make sure it's where it needs to be. And like you see them on the shelves, man. And like the fact that they can even do this so consistently to where you can open box after box after box and they're all going to look identical and they're all going to look just rolled perfectly. You know, it's crazy. Like it is not nearly as easy as it looks.
Well, I mean, like I said, just from knowing how fragile that leaf is, when she was just taking her hand and spreading it out flat,
yep.
I would almost bet that nobody watching this right now would be able to do it without ripping it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even try.
And she's rubbing it with like pectin is typically what they use to sort of glue the leaves, so to speak. And then she just cuts the end. And I mean, look at that. Like that's a whole stack of cigars that are just perfectly rolled.
Uniformly symmetrical.
Yep. Same ring gauge and everything. And then that's a half wheel I was talking about, that right there.
Oh, wow.
And so that they'll weigh. Some companies weigh them, and if their weight's off, then they'll know that there's something wrong with at least some of the cigars in there, or maybe only a couple of them. But it's pretty wild.
And back to Phil's point earlier, tobacco is one crop where you do have that almost an art to it, and you have it from nearly the beginning of the growing process all the way up till then. Because I was telling Justin the whole firing process, there is an art to that, and the reason why I say that is because I couldn't sit here and explain to you what to look for in whether I need to raise the temperature or not.
Right.
I could probably give you some outlines, but there's just some things after seeing so many seasons and so many barns being fired that I would walk into a barn and be like, okay, no, this barn needs to go hotter. Or no, we need to cool it off. Or we need a cold smoke on this one. It doesn't need any heat. We just need smoke. And just knowing knowing what that barn needs to get it the rest of the way cured out by fire cured there's an art to that. And that, it's something that was kind of taught to me by my dad, but it wasn't taught.
It wasn't taught. It's just something you
it's just watching him doing it so long that you pick up on all the different nuances and intricacies of what it needs.
Yeah, man.
It's
acquired knowledge.
Walking into your room and just knowing that something's off. With our animals, going back to herps, it's like you notice good example, the rhinos. Like my younger female was feeding everything the other day, and I noticed the younger female wasn't out, and she was sort of tucked back in the corner. So I was like, she must be in a shed cycle. Woke up this morning, sure enough, there was a shed. Like you pick up on the small things, like the inconsistencies in from baseline behavior in these animals and stuff like that. And again, it's not something you could really explain to someone.
Right.
When you're getting down to individual animals in particular, it's like you can tell people, okay, keep an eye out for X, Y, and Z. But it's like with that rhino in particular, like she's always out. They're always out, all of them. Mm-hmm. So when one's disappeared and I don't see it for a couple of days, I'm like, it's got to be in a shed cycle.
And the exact opposite for another one, because if one snake's always in its hide and then it's out that day, I better check the temperature. Is the hot side too hot because it's not in that hide that it's always in?
Yeah. Yep. Great point, man.
Lisa asked what green tobacco smells like, which I do not know.
Yeah. What does green tobacco smell like?
Wow.
Green tobacco.
Yeah. It's a very unique smell. Both the green tobacco smell and the smell of tobacco being cured. The candles have tried to imitate that. I've seen candles that's like tobacco barn.
Yeah.
They can't imitate.
I guarantee you that's not what they smell like.
No. And, but green tobacco does have it's a very fresh scent, kind of fresh. It doesn't smell anything like this, but fresh in the same way that I would think of like pine.
Okay.
It's a pretty strong scent. And It's a very fresh scent. It doesn't smell anything like pine, but it kind of reminds me of like the freshness of pine. It's a very fresh scent. And then
does it have a sweetness like alfalfa?
Sort of, not quite that sweet though. It's just a very fresh green scent, but it is completely on a different spectrum of what it smells like than anything else I can think
Yeah,
of.
so it's not going to hit you in the face like a fresh mowed lawn, but
No.
it has that green smell, so to speak.
Yes. And
Okay.
when you walk into a barn and it's full of green tobacco, then it will hit you in the face. The rest of the
Yeah.
time, of the time it really doesn't. But like the tobacco, the fire tobacco, you would think it would just smell like wood, like hardwood burning. But it doesn't. It mixes the hardwood with all the off gas that's coming off of the green tobacco, and it has a completely different smell too. And now that smell does smell very sweet.
That's
awesome. Super cool, man. Super cool. I'm so glad you came on tonight, man. This is great.
I enjoyed it, man.
This is great.
Yeah, I mean, talking about like green tobaccos, I know I've mentioned Candela wrappers before, which you don't see terribly often in cigars, at least. I don't think they've ever been particularly popular, but if you ever see a cigar with like a green wrapper, that's a Candela wrapper, and basically that just hasn't been fermented like the other ones have. It's probably as close to like tobacco as is, if that makes sense.
I feel like they use them more so in like a candy cane wrapper just for aesthetics.
Yeah. I mean, it has a very flavor-wise, it's definitely a sort of an acquired taste because it is very grassy. It has a very grassy, like hay-like flavor to it that some people aren't into, some people like. I find that there's some companies that can pull off a Candela blend really well, and then a lot of the other ones, it's just kind of, it tastes like
I'm not into it.
A fresh cigar that probably just needs to sit for a long time, but that's just how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But Dustin, what kind of cigar is it? I don't even know. A cigar might be a stretch, but I know I've bought one time just because it was fire cured. But it's like I think it's like a French design, and it looks like almost a really thin mini torpedo. And the idea is supposed to be like to cut them in half. Have you ever seen those?
There's a couple of sizes, like those ones, those KFCs I gave you, Phil.
Yeah,
those really thin ones. I forget
those
what
are
size those were.
Super Lanceros.
Well, this was a dark fired tobacco, and I bought one of them one time just out of a humidor from a cigar shop, mainly just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
But when I opened it up, it did smell just like the fully cured dark fired tobacco. Like
it was probably a Kentucky Fire.
Yeah, almost
KFC.
Yeah, I can almost guarantee it was a KFC Lancero, the Kentucky fired from Drew Estate in a Lancero, and it's like a gigantic cigarette.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was picturing was.
Yeah,
it was like a thick cigarette, but yeah, it really did smell very, very similar to like after you've stripped the tobacco and gotten it out of the barn, what our stripping shed smelled like.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're really the only people that I know of that are doing anything with that sort of Kentucky fire cured type style with cigars.
I love those ones you gave me, man. Those Lanceros.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think you just
strong flavor.
I think Justin just smoked too many of them. You know what I mean? Like it got to him after a while.
I got a lot of them, and it got to the point where I was just like,
it
was too much. I don't know. Early on when I was getting into cigars, I smoked a good bit of them and I liked them. And I don't, like I said, I think it's probably more so my palate changing over time, but just over time as I smoked them, I just wasn't as into them as I used to be. And I just wish that smoky flavor was a little more subtle. Like overall, I find that as I'm getting older, like I like more subtlety in the flavors of some cigars, depending on, if it's sweetness or like those acids, those are way too sweet for me at this point. Like the Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust Sober Mesa Brulees are like the perfect amount of sweetness. Like it's very subtle. It's right there. It's enough for you to notice, but it's not hijacking the flavor of everything. If that makes sense. And those KFCs are kind of the same way. I mean, it is like every now and then I'll get a hankering for one and I'll have to grab one. But I don't know. Yeah, I smoke them now, and it's just so upfront,
I was looking. I know my father had the Lautier, and there was a super long Lancero that had a smokiness to it, but I don't think they produce it anymore. But it was part of that Lautier, Selection Special, whatever you want to call it. and I had a few of those, and those were really good. I was on a Lancero kick for a while, so
Yeah. But what other species were you seeing out there besides hognose?
which we have to talk to. Do we have to talk about, by the way? So
Lots of copperheads. I mean, every time you get into a slide pile, that was just perfect habitat for copperheads. Lots of copperheads, lots of gray rat snakes, lots of coluber constrictors, black racers. Those were probably the most commonly seen. Some people would claim to see a lot of eastern milk snakes. I seen them a couple of times, but where I was at, there wasn't a whole lot of them. There was a few in my county my county is one of the few places that you can find them in Kentucky because of us being in the south corner next to the lakes, just having the right habitat, but that I never seen. One was the pygmy rattlesnake. I've looked for 15 years for a pygmy. I still have not found a pygmy, at least not a Kentucky pygmy. The Kentucky pine snake, it's one of the few places in Kentucky down there where they're pretty common. You can find them on iNaturalist and stuff, really close to where I grew up. People having pictures of them. And timber rattlesnake. I never seen a timber, not in Kentucky. I've seen them over in Illinois, just north of me, but I've never actually seen one in Kentucky.
wow.
But yeah, there's gray rat snake, coluber constrictor, lots of Nerodia. And I'll be honest, I'm terrible at telling the different subspecies of Nerodia, especially because where we live have a bunch of different subspecies of Nerodia.
They all look the same.
Yeah, except for the copperbelly. The copperbelly is, I know that it's protected. That's the only one that I can tell with, I think, somewhat preciseness, but the rest of them, most of them look the same. They all, as they just get older, they just get darker, and that's it. And but there's lots of Nerodia. The main ones were eastern milk snakes, black king snakes, black racers, and copperheads. And like I said, where I live, copperheads is the most common snake you find when you're looking for snakes.
Now those pygmies you speak of, are they militarius, or are they Streckeri?
I think they're Cistrus malarius.
Okay.
That's the only explanation I can find online.
Yeah, they don't. It's probably like an intergrade zone or something where it's like Carolina colors meets Western colors. I'm sure
it might be because, I mean, like I said, where our pygmy, if you look at the pygmy map, it's like it goes across Middle Tennessee, and then you'll see one little finger that just barely reaches up into Kentucky, and it follows the Tennessee River up around Kentucky Lakes area.
Wow, that's super cool.
So it's like the very northernmost point for pygmies, and then you don't get into the Masagas, some of the Masagas, until you get up into Illinois. And one of my buddies actually sent me a picture earlier this year. He was out morel hunting, and he's like, "What is this?" And at first glance, I thought it was a cottonmouth because he just sent me a close up of the head that had that eye band. I'm like, something don't look right about that though. And he sent me more pictures, and it wound up being an eastern Masaga. And I gave him Scott Ballard with the Illinois DNR's contact information so that he could turn it in, because that's about as rare as hitting the lottery. There's like less than 300 left in the state of Illinois.
Really?
Wow. Yeah, and he saw one, a young one too. Just had two. It looked like it had been through two shed cycles because it just had two buttons, and the end button was still pointed. So a very young eastern Masaga.
That's crazy, man. And like, it's always the mushroom guys that find the cool shit.
Yeah,
it's like
it's the herper's curse, because I've had people send me pictures and be like, "What's this?" And it's a pygmy rattlesnake, and I'm like, "I've looked for 15 years and I can't find one." And you just walked outside to look at your daisies, and there was one.
Go to check your mailbox, and there it is.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, it's like our friend he's a fish and wildlife guy for Florida, and he just had someone in his neighborhood app for his neighborhood be like, "What snake is this?" and like, help me ID it. And it's just a giant indigo head coming out from underneath like a deck. And it's like he's like, of course I'm at work, I'm not home, So
Now, the one snake that I guess at least in the state of Kentucky is pretty hard to find, but in my area is pretty common is the copper belly water snake.
That's cool.
The copper belly Nerodia, I see them. We see them quite often, and I know that they're protected in the state, but do see them quite often.
Because those at some point a subspecies of the yellow bellies or red bellies?
I think so. Is
their own thing?
Is the subspecies? Is it the? Like I said, I'm terrible with Nerodia. Is the yellow belly or red belly the plain belly water snake?
I was going to say I thought that the coppers were
Maybe
part of the
that's what it
plain
was.
belly, and the red belly was totally different.
I think the coppers are a subspecies of the plain belly, if I'm not mistaken, and I very well could be with Nerodia.
Yeah. Where's Montrose when you need him?
I was going to say, where the hell is Chris when you need him?
Yeah. Oh, man.
Sure,
That's
Jake's
cool,
going to
man.
listen to this. He's going to be yelling in his car.
Of course. So you'd mentioned earlier in the show about having two different phenotypes of corns. Can you dive into that a little bit?
I don't have two different phenotypes of corns, but
okay.
I want to pick up some of the Kentucky locality because
that's what I meant. I meant Kentucky's got two different phenotypes, right?
Oh yes, Kentucky has the ones that are around Mammoth Cave, and then they have the ones that is a little farther northeastern. Both of them are, I'm going to butcher this word, allopatric, geographically isolated. What's the word I'm looking for?
I think that's right. Allopatric, right?
Something like that. But it's geographically isolated from the rest of the corn range. So there is I've seen some phenomenal, really different looking corns that come from some of these Kentucky localities. So I'd really like to get my hands on those and work with them. Kentucky has some very weird laws. I can't keep more than 5 of any supposed to be native species, but I know that it's not like the corns that you get from anywhere else is okay. But yeah, and it doesn't matter if it's wild collected or not, you're not supposed to keep more than 5. So, but I think the laws are just so vague that it doesn't specify that you can't breed them yourself. Just like you can't obtain 5 from either the wild or from another breeder. So I've got to get some hardcore answers on that before I start trying to go toward that project. But the way the law actually reads is that you can't obtain more than 5 from a breeder or from the wild. But it doesn't say anything about if you breed them yourself. And I don't know if that's on purpose or away from it.
Yeah.
But yes, there's the one right in the center of Kentucky. That's the Mammoth Cave location. And I'm not real sure what they call the more northeastern location, what county that's in or anything else.
It is so crazy that they're so isolated in that northeastern spot.
Yeah.
It's obviously mountain ranges and whatnot,
and that's literally the only place that you'll find them in Kentucky is those 2 spots.
Wow, it's super red.
Photo by Odd Pearson. Kidding, it's Todd Pearson. I'm clicking the button for better pictures, damn it. Yeah,
I know yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
I love that stripe that goes through the saddles.
Yeah, they're just different. And I mean, I don't even know really what about them makes them so different. It's just that I guess geographically divergent population is just has a different look to it. And I would like to get it and see what you could do with it, kind of like what they've done with the Okeetees after line breeding them. I mean, I know you get away from that, but I'd like to see what other little traits you might could juice up and make it more.
It needs castagna in it.
Of course it does.
Of course it does. Jesus. Justin.
See, now they're just trying to make me have an aneurysm because the whole red rat snake thing versus corn snake. They're just like, have you seen a red corn snake? Let me see if it says what the other county is. Red River Gorge, geologic area.
I want to say, don't quote me on this. I want to say it's Mammoth Cave has 2 count. counties, which is Edmondson and something else. And then I want to say, is the other one Jasper?
This just says Mammoth Cave and surrounding counties, and then records also exist within the Red River Gorge, which is not up here.
That's probably pretty close to the Red River Gorge.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
They gave us like no counties or nothing. It's just dots.
I know for a while, and that may have been before Kentucky, because like in 2005 is when Kentucky come in and made a bunch of sweeping laws that affected herpetoculture. But I know at one point Will Bird, and he was, I think he's the herpetoculture or the herpetology curator at the Louisville Zoo. He was working with Kentucky locality corn snakes and was breeding them and giving them to the local herp society and that kind of stuff.
I mean, they have it listed here in Northeast, so.
Well, here's one from, I obviously have the big screen open right now, but here's one from iNaturalist that's just north of that whole Mammoth Cave area. Look at the darkness of this one.
Darkness. Hold on a second. I'm trying to get it to cooperate, StreamYard.
Yeah, that almost looks like it might be a cross between a gray rat snake and our corn, because that's one thing that's one thing that's really bad about our gray rats is, like, you know, a lot of gray rats are really pretty gray and black, but as you get more into like Western Kentucky, I don't know if it's an intergrade zone between the black rats or whatever, that whole complex is a mess, but we have like the most ugly pig turd brown gray rats ever were in Western Kentucky. Like they are not pretty to look at. They're just brown rat snakes.
So this is off of a highway just south of the Mammoth Cave Park, and this is also iNaturalist, so you guys can find this yourselves.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up iNat.
Look at this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's crazy. It's got like the almost tessera looking.
And Smitty, you were having a fit over red rat snakes. Guess what the locals call them in Kentucky?
Do I even want to know?
Probably not.
Can I guess? They call them chicken snakes.
Red chicken snakes.
That's
red
it. I knew it. I knew it.
I'll almost take that over red rat snake.
Yeah, that's a red chicken snake, and the gray rat snake is just a chicken snake.
All right, so now here's one that's literally on the eastern border of Mammoth Cave National Park, and this thing is just super dark.
My keyboard's decided just to give up, so.
Yeah.
Those are also older animals, I think, too. So I think part of that's just age.
Could very well be.
And Scott said they did that just to fuck with me. It's entirely possible. And he also said Todd. I know it was Todd, Scott. It was a joke.
Yeah. Will Bird had a little video back a few years ago that he's like, we was looking for corn snakes, and we kept on asking people, you know, have you seen a corn snake? And all of them said no. And then we showed a picture to some lady, and the lady's like, oh, a red chicken snake? Yeah, they're right down there. And he said he walked right to them. Flip this board, and there'll be some under there.
All right, now here's one from in Mammoth Cave Park. Obviously, it's on asphalt, but look at how the dorsal, like, it's one giant, it's like saddles within a saddle. Like, look at this.
Yeah.
Oh. Whoa. I like that.
Blank sides to it.
Like a San Diego gopher.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I tried to pull up iNat, and Chrome was having none of it. So.
Oh yeah. Well, we did it. I mean, there's only.
So there's probably like 10 sightings altogether.
Well, yeah. So I looked. I first typed in Kentucky, so it only gives me observations from within the borders of Kentucky, and there's 6, 7, 8 observations. That's it for the whole state. So.
Yeah, I know that they're very limited. It's just those 2 little populations, and the map that Smitty was showing earlier for the Mammoth Cave side, it makes it look very big, but from looking at like encounter data, it looks like it's just on the border of 2 counties right there, kind of close to the Mammoth Cave National Park. It's not that big of it's not as big of an area as it looks like on that map.
Right.
But yeah, I know that I just think that since they were so isolated for however long, that you might have some stuff pop out or some traits pop out that isn't in other places. And, it's home state, kind of like these Ladies Island corns. They probably mean more to him than any other corn snake because they're from right there. And
absolutely. I have 2 corns from Broward County, my county, and they just look like normal corns, but they're from my county, man. So of course I'm going to breed them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the way to do it, man. So let's talk hognose, man.
Okay.
So you're keeping Easterns or you're keeping Westerns?
I'm keeping Westerns. I would like to try to keep Easterns at some point. It's just I started off with the Westerns because they're a little bit easier to get switched over to rodents.
They're a lot easier.
And I'm still not sure that I'm not sure I want to keep an Eastern and get it switched to rodents. But I'm also not sure I want to go through the trouble of keeping toads or frogs to feed the Eastern either.
Well, see, I had a friend who lived in North Florida, and he had let me try and get my story right. So he had a neighbor kill a crazy Halloween Eastern hog on his property to basically say, "Oh, I killed this rattlesnake to save your family." I mean, we're talking Halloween, black and orange, like what you want. You know what I mean? And I think that kind of sparked something. And he wound up getting a juvenile, and he got it on raw frog legs from the Chinese market and for like international food market. And he just fed it that, man.
Listen, I live in Kentucky. You can get raw frog legs at Walmart.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and we used to go gigging together, and we'd gig leopard frogs, but it was almost like we're gonna eat them. Like we're not gonna feed them to the snake. So, but exactly, you're where you are. I'm sure you'd have no problem. You and your friends go do gig some leopards, gig some bulls, and call it a day. Freeze them.
Yeah, I would. If I got into the Easterns, I would want the black and orange ones because I've found in the tobacco patch both like the solid melanistic ones and the black and orange ones in my area.
Cool.
But the black and orange ones just are a lot more wow factor to me.
Oh, of course.
Now the Western hognose I have, they're kind of more my morph project. I've got all 3 of mine are Arctic.
Nice.
Got one female that is they're all normals but Arctics, but they're all het for something. I've got one female that is Arctic het albino. I've got one male that's Arctic het sable, and then I've got one female that's a purple line Arctic het sunburst. So it's both het albino and sable. And what I'm really going for with that is I want to make some of the Arctic sable stuff, just because when you cross the Arctic and sable together, you literally get almost a blue or purple snake.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen some pictures of those. I want to say, I don't remember who we were talking to about those because that was something else they were going for too. It might have been Kevin Barron.
Yeah, I think it was. If it wasn't Kevin, we were probably talking about it with Jake and Kevin.
Yeah,
and I would like to take that eventually and maybe mix in some of the lavender morph and see what that does. Because I mean, the sable almost completely knocks out the lavender morph by itself. But if you add the Arctic to lighten it all up, I wonder if you go more toward the purple spectrum or more purple spectrum.
Yeah, that'll be awesome, man. Super cool. I feel like of all the morphs that are of different species that we keep in herpetoculture, we're getting better and better with different spectrums with hogs. I really do. There's so many possibilities. So, and it's funny we mentioned Eastern hogs, and Ryan Cox jumps in the chat right when we mention it. So
I've been trying to talk Ryan into being a roadie with me to go down to Daytona next year.
Dude,
is gonna get off or not?
You guys should do it, man.
I know. I told him I'm going. I'm absolutely going. But my wife is a school teacher, and my kid is in school, so neither one of them will go. And I just don't want to drive the 12 and a half hours by myself. So
it's not that bad.
trying to talk Ryan into. I'm like, hey, listen, I'll drive the 2.5 hours to you if you just want to ride along for the rest.
Yeah, man, you guys just do it. It'll be good. That's pretty awesome. You got Cox on one side and you on the other, and you guys should correspond and rendezvous more, man. Get some herping in.
Yeah, I do want to do some herping more. I want to do some more herping on the east side of the state. It's just with work and kids and that. It's just so much easier to stay closer to home. But I definitely want to get out on the eastern side of the state because I still have never seen a Kentucky rattlesnake, neither one. So that's one of my goals for this next year. It was my goal last year, but we'll place it as a goal again.
Yeah, man. And I'm in the same boat, man. I've done a lot of South Florida herping, and there's a ton of species I have yet to see in South Florida, but I feel like I need to at least venture north more. It's a hike, you know?
Yeah.
You guys don't have black rats? Do those get into the like southeastern part of the state?
I have never heard of anybody getting a black rat around here. Now, whether they're actually said that they're here or not, I'm not 100% sure. I know that when you go north a little ways into Illinois, you see lots of black rats, but I have not seen any black rats pop up like on the ID groups or anything like that. The only rat snakes we see around here mostly are the gray rats. But like I said, I'm not sure our gray rats isn't part of an intergrade zone because they're not gray. They're just not gray at all. They're brown, and they're a dark dingy brown too.
Yeah, I'm looking at a map right now, and I guess that would make sense. You guys probably wouldn't get them because I got confused on my geography, and I thought Kentucky was closer to South Carolina than it is. Maps are hard.
Yeah, we don't get the black rats as far as I know. We don't get the yellow, but I've never seen a yellow rat. You know, all that stuff is out of our range. Something that is very weird that supposedly barely tips into the state at about the same geography as the pygmy is supposedly we have scarlet king snakes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
I've never seen one, but
I haven't either. I'm convinced they're not even real. I've been
aren't you
trying to
convinced
find
that
them.
way about corals too?
That, yeah. Well, I mean, I've differences. I've actually seen corals. It's just been a very long time. I've never seen a scarlet, and I try to find those. Like when I'm out looking, I'm peeling bark on pine trees, man. I don't think they exist.
And LDL and around that area, like almost the same geography as like the northernmost point of the pygmies. Supposedly we have scarlets, and I've never seen one. Phil Peak, he does a lot of field herping in Kentucky. He's posted pictures of them he's found, so they're here. I've never been able to see one.
Well, I've never found a scarlet king in South Florida. I know plenty of friends that have, but our friends Jeff and Kendra, Puget Sound Python, shout out.
Oh,
when they were down for Daytona, our friend KJ put them on a spot, and they found like friggin' 12 in a night.
I think that's what it is with those though. Is like their populations are like hyper localized to certain areas.
Sure.
And if they're not there, they're just not there. Like I'm in terms of Ladies Island in particular, I'm fairly convinced that there are some species that just aren't here.
Yeah.
I've heard the same thing about pygmies. I've heard that there's pygmy areas or not.
Yep.
And well, I mean, I know in my county there's one spot that pygmies have been found. They're absolutely documented to have been there, but I still haven't gotten lucky and found them.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a theme you'll see with like those small species that are they occupy very small areas. And so therefore, if you're going to find them, like they're going to be populated plenty in those smaller radiuses.
Right.
But you're not going to see them sort of spread out like you would some of the bigger stuff, like, your rat snakes and things like that travel more. Because I can't imagine scarlets in particular, or pygmies for that matter too, travel very far outside of wherever they're born, like.
Right.
I'd imagine we're probably talking like maybe a 1/4 mile radius, and even that seems generous, but I don't know. But it does. definitely seems like it's the case where it's like if there's pygmies there, it's a healthy population, and it seems to be the same with scarlets.
Yeah.
Well, it's also kind of like that audio clip I sent you the other day, Justin.
Which one?
The one I sent, the audio clip I sent you.
Oh yeah, that.
Yeah. Ryan Cox says next time he goes to Owensboro, he's going to hit you up, Dustin. Okay.
Okay.
Who's Owen?
He has a burrow.
Yes. Oh man, good stuff, guys. Covered a lot of good stuff tonight.
Rename Ladies Island Smittyburrow.
Oh God.
Then you'll have some Smitty'sboro locality corns.
Hey, there you go, man. So I got one of my I won't say one of mine, but I guess it is one of mine. But one of the F1s from 2021. Jake somehow ended up with more males because someone doesn't know how to sex a snake, which is me. And I got a 2021 male back, and I'm probably going to pair him back to the female next year.
All right, cool.
Be the first step in the line, the line project. I'm very excited about that.
Nice. How's the cutting thing going?
Good. I weighed and fed everybody Saturday. Everybody had that week off because of Daytona. Wasn't a whole lot. So there was actually a little bit of a gain on the cut group throughout that complete bye week. And then the uncut group didn't even really lose weight. They pretty much just maintained, which I thought was interesting.
Nice.
So it continues. We'll see how it goes.
That's cool, man. Good stuff.
I still number 6, which is the non-eater, is still non-eaten, and that one's 2 grams behind everyone else now. So I think that'll be a good one to sort of show what non-starters look like on the same timeline.
Yeah.
You know, it's frustrating, but I offer it. I need to try washing something and trying that. There's just a couple tricks I just haven't busted out yet. But all the stuff from Daytona is eaten except for that zombie corn that I got from Alan. And I think I just need to try live with that one. I think that's it. But everything else, like those Theori, like both monsters with food, everything else, like eats like a champ. That Alterna that I got my dad ate without problems. So
the Leonis you got from Chris, did you give that a boiled pink like he said, or you just gave it a frozen thawed? Nice. Nice. Excellent.
Frozen thawed. The first time I fed it, it took a minute for it to realize what was going on, and then it grabbed it and ate it. And then the second time I chased it around the tub for a few minutes and then just ended up setting the piggy down on the hide, and it ate it. So
cool.
And then that other Leonis, the Leonis that I got from that older couple, man, that thing is like no games. Like saw the mouse, grabbed it, ate it like it was starving. So
nice. Awesome possum.
Scott said, or let the ones that refuse to eat not be something you choose to progress. Yeah, I don't know what this one's odd because all the others in that clutch, like every other of the 11 animals that are siblings to that one, direct siblings, clutch mates, they're all eating great. Like none of them refuse food. I drop feed pretty much all of them. This one though, like it's healthy still. It's not looking sickly or it's not looking thin or anything like that. It's just not wanting to take off. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I had one in my clutch that just would not eat, and it's right now in the wine cooler. It's going to be there for a couple months, and when it comes out, it'll either eat or it won't.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm not gonna like force the issue, but I definitely want to try some things before I completely write it off. I don't know how you guys feel about that. I kind of have a weird take on that. I know there's a lot of people that non-starters, they're kind of like, look, if it doesn't take off, it doesn't take off. It wasn't meant to be, which I understand and I get. But the way I see it, it's like I'm the reason it's here in the first place. So I feel like I should at least try to get it off on the right foot and then yeah, if it ends up taking off, it's not something I'm likely going to breed more of. But that particular animal.
Yeah, I'm kind of like you. I mean, I'll try every trick. I'll try the washing it and the boiling it and the leaving it overnight and the deli cupping it and the taking it for a drive. And then my last straw is usually put it in the cooler and brumate it. And if it doesn't eat after brumation, then that's it. I can, my conscience can be clear on that one because I tried everything I could.
Yeah.
But I will try everything I can because in my experience, even if they're kind of a slow starter and it takes some of those tricks, usually after a few feedings, then they're hammering it and they're fine.
Yeah.
It's like getting it started. It's like that first one is half the battle. Mm-hmm. But if I can get it after the brumation, if it goes, great. And if it doesn't, then I've washed my hands because I've tried everything I could.
Yeah. And Scott said at the same time, 5% of hatchlings would usually make it to adulthood. And it's like, I agree with that. But at the same time, we're talking like captivity. Like, again, I'm the reason it's there. Like, I decided to pair those animals. So I feel somewhat responsible for the reason that it's there. And I need to do what I can to at least give it the best shot. And again, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But that's something Eric Westmoreland was actually posting, talking to us about the other day, was every year, I guess he has a group of hatchlings because he hatches a ton of corns. And his non-starters, he puts them in the fridge, I think he said, for like a month. And then he'll bring them back out. And he said that usually does the trick. So I don't know, how long are you leaving yours in to get them going?
When I brumate?
Yeah.
I'm just throwing. I usually throw the hatch. I'm going to throw the hatchling in. I'm going to leave it in for 2 months, and then take it out and see if it eats. And I think I don't really want to put it in under for 3 months. That just seems like entirely too long for something that has not ate.
Right.
But 2 months seems like a good middle of the ground. It'll get it down cool enough and long enough that I think if it's going to eat, if that's what it needs to kickstart that system, it will. And if it doesn't, then it just doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see both sides of it.
With us too, the argument about not passing it on, I get that, but I mean, nothing we do in herpetoculture is natural selection. It's the exact opposite of that. As natural selection, none of the albinos would live, and none of the waffle, bacon, pancake, ball pythons would live because they'd be picked off very first thing when they see this bright yellow orange thing in the field.
Right.
So I mean, we're already going toward producing genes and phenotypes that have no business in the wild and wouldn't make it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a reason.
There's a reason Mom has 12.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say there's a reason why no one ever finds an adult leucistic in the wild. It's always a neonate.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's yeah, I don't know. It's I had a complete train of thought and it just got derailed. Damn it.
Yeah, you remember at 2 a.m. in Texas.
No, what it was like if it's if it's like a particular line that is like notorious for being difficult to start in a species that is historically not difficult to start, like some of the Keys corns in particular, it's like I can understand sort of outcrossing or producing as minimal amount of those as possible, if none at all. If there's really not a whole lot of fruits in those loins, then probably not worth pursuing. But if there's someone out there that's willing to put in the work, I know Chris has mentioned it with the Leonis. He's like, some lines are way harder to get going than others, and I mean, it is what it is. Those Alterna I still have yet to find something that tops getting those Alterna babies going. But
I mean, ultimately, if I get this corn that's been notoriously difficult to start, like I said, I've given most of them to kids as a pet anyway. If I can get it to start, it ain't like those genes are going to be passed on because I'm not selling it to a breeder. I'm giving it to a kid as a pet. So if it can just start and live life, then
yeah,
good for everybody involved.
Well, what I'm curious about too when I hear that, especially when you're talking about like one animal in a clutch, is like, is one animal really that big of a concern to where that would like start this daisy chain of genetics of animals that just don't start? To me, it seems like it would be there needs to be more animals that are problematic than just
if
really
the entire clutch or litter was
right.
reluctant, then yeah, you got an issue. But it may not even be an issue. It may just be that they don't want to. They want to eat what they're supposed to eat. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean, I tried braining with this one. I'm gonna try washing next just to see. Again,
have you tried a live pink?
I did early on, but I probably need to come back to it.
Yeah,
I'm waiting on a female to pop with some day olds because I need to get some for the rhinos so I can get the rhinos started.
Yeah, man, I would just leave. Dude, everything loves a live pinky, you know?
I don't know, man. Not everything, because I left one overnight with this one, and it was like, nah. But that was also like immediately after those first sheds.
Yeah,
So,
you gotta give it time to wake up, you know?
Get on the train.
So, oh, well, this is a hell of a show, boys. This is a good time.
I enjoyed it. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, man.
If people want to follow you or get in touch, what is the best way for them to do that?
West Kentucky Exotics on Instagram. My email is westkentuckyexotics@gmail.com, or you can look at West Kentucky Exotics on Facebook, but honestly, I'm not very active on that. I mostly IG or Facebook message me at Dustin Black.
Awesome. Well, this episode was brought to you by BlackBoxCages.com. Use that code THN at checkout. Save yourself a little bit of money. Get yourself a nice rack. Get yourself a nice cage. Get both. We're not partial here. We like it all. We use it all. You won't be disappointed.
I started setting up the 3-foot healing enclosure in my BlackBox slider. I have been taking pictures, and the background is installed, and the excavator clay has been clumped. So I'm gonna put some stuff out for pictures and video. Very exciting.
Yeah, we'll show that off when it's done and ready to go.
Oh yeah,
I've seen the picture, at least the one picture you've shown me, and it looks good.
Yeah.
So yes, THN at checkout, BlackBox, THN at checkout on fullviewsapparel.com. That's just for listeners and viewers of this show. Phil has his Subocularis hat, which I will be making available here at some point soon. I'm planning to get the Okatee hats back in stock at some point here soon. Work's just been swamped, and I have not wanted my embroiderer to stop what she's doing with other orders to make my stuff. So
fair enough.
But if you order shirts, I do make those happen, quickly. So put an order. Code THN at checkout. It's 15% off. Again, just for listeners and viewers. I don't post that code anywhere else. Puget Sound Pythons, good people in the Pacific Northwest. The Scarlet King magnets, apparently.
Clearly.
Because Mother of God is like picture after picture after picture of Scarlet King.
It's like, oh, look, another one. Oh, look, another one.
Same damn snake. They're just changing the background.
Yeah.
And then Cold-Blooded Caffeine. Again, we have an affiliate link in the description. If you click that and you end up buying something, me and Phil get a little something as a result. Help your boys out. Cigars are expensive.
And you get a tasty brew.
Yeah. I'm excited to get things that are coming down the pipeline.
Yes, the grinds.
Yes.
It's all about the grinds.
Be on the lookout for that. I'm sure we'll obviously do an announcement and stuff when that happens. And then were we making any sort of formal announcement about the other thing or no?
I mean, we can
just a little something.
Yeah, we're bringing it back.
We're bringing the magazine back.
There it is.
Yeah. So
what on?
we changed the name a little bit, which I've already gotten compliments on. Had Jen from BlackBox was like, "Thank you," because I know herpetoculture, be it people talking about the network or the magazine, I know it can be a mouthful, and I know it's a lot to say.
Yeah.
So we just shortened it down to Herp Magazine to keep it simple, sort of rebrand a little bit. The plan currently is to release it quarterly. Billy and Phil came to me and said, "Hey, should we do it again and just sort of take some of the chaos out of it that we had when we were doing it monthly, and make it less stressful?" We said it was a good thing we had going, and let's give it another shot, and just make it less of a chore.
Yeah.
and more of a resource. And I mean, it was a resource, but there was a lot of work that went into doing that thing monthly. It's no small feat, but I think quarterly it'll be a little more manageable, especially with everyone's schedules and stuff now, and won't be as stressful on all of us. We can span things out a little bit. So currently, if you have something you want to write, hit us up. Myself, Phil, Billy Hunt, message the network, any of the pages, whatever.
Yeah.
If you want to write something, we pretty much leave the content of whatever people write up to the author, which is something you don't really see very often. Because we want people to write about stuff they're interested in. I don't want to give someone who's not into sailfin dragons an article saying, "Hey, I need an article on sailfin dragons," when they're not
exactly.
into them.
Exactly.
So if you've got something you're feeling particularly jazzed about, hit us up. We are definitely trying to get content together, sort of for the first re-inaugural issue, and then issues past that. We're trying to get as much stuff in as we can so that we're not scrambling towards the closer to the deadlines and things. So hit us up. We are planning to have the print on demand option back. We got to get issue back up and running again. So there's some small logistical stuff that the three of us got to hammer out. But the plan is for it to come back. If you're in Australia like Scott, or you're anywhere in the world and you want to write, we don't turn down content unless it's something, inflammatory or overtly negative, I guess is the better word. But opinion pieces we'll take. I like opinion pieces. I think it's cool stuff to have.
Yeah.
As long as it's not, again, derogatory or accusatory towards anybody in particular. But
yeah, and it doesn't have to be specifically on keeping of a particular species, or even keeping in general. It could be book reviews that are herp related. It could be field observations. It could be product reviews. Exactly. So
product reviews too. It doesn't have to be something like reptile specific. Like we've done the Wise cameras in the past, which we use, like things that you use in your room if you think it's a product, like water filters. I did one on the pure water filter that I use and still use. There's no shortage of options. If it's something that you want to tell the world about and you want to write a review about, please do. Again, field herping, opinion pieces, travel stuff, whatever.
Sure.
Industry spotlights. So we're going to be bringing those back. I think it'd be cool to do something with some of the photographers and stuff that we see and follow on Instagram. If we could do like a photographer of the quarter or something like that. I don't know. Well, we got a ton of ideas, but we're bringing it back. It'll be good. I'm excited.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the formal announcement. So.
Stay tuned.
That's right. We will be back Thursday for THP. No idea what the plan is. Look at that. Phil got the shirt. He stole that shirt. Everybody know that?
I did.
He took all the shirts out of my bag and put them in his box in Daytona and then walked off with them.
I picked it up in broad daylight and I scratched it.
That's not stealing. That's taking.
Scratch my CD.
You scratched my CD.
He's like, oh, what are you doing over there? Playing on your computer? No, I'm walking my dog. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Bye.